We've all had that gut feeling when something just isn't quite right. Call it a sixth sense, but that survival instinct has helped keep us safe since our earliest ancestors were hunted by large carnivores. But some people experience a heightened version of this called a foreboding. They're genuinely able to sense impending doom while the people around them remain blissfully unaware. A handful of forebodings in history have been so specific that people label them full-blown premonitions and questioned if these people can somehow see into the future. Because whether it was decades before the tragedy or even the day of, these people said or wrote eerily accurate details about some of the world's most tragic events. John F. Kennedy's statements on the morning of his days before in Dallas, Texas in 1963, Kennedy told his friend Dave Powers that he had a terrible feeling about going. His comments on the very morning of his would go down in history as a premonition of what would happen later that day. Hours before the event, JFK randomly remarked to his wife, Jackie, that the previous night would have been a hell of a night to a president. She was clearly spooked and concerned about the comments, but he doubled down by stating anyone perched above the crowd with a could do it. At 12:30 p.m. that very afternoon, Lee Harvey Oswald and the president with a from the 6th floor of the Texas School Book Depository. Morgan Robertson's book predicted the sinking of the Titanic. In 1898, 14 years before the Titanic, a fictional ship in Morgan Robertson's book Futility had far too many similarities to be considered a coincidence. His book describes an 800-foot-long passenger liner that hits an iceberg and sinks. The Titanic was 882 feet. Like the Titanic, the fictional ship was the largest vessel of its time and was labeled unsinkable. Both boats carried the bare minimum amount of lifeboats, even though there were way more passengers on board. Robertson could have had no idea about these details, since the Titanic wouldn't even begin construction for another 11 years after the book's release. The fictional ship, moving at 25 knots, struck an iceberg on the starboard side at midnight on a night in April, 400 miles from Newfoundland. The Titanic, moving at 22.5 knots, struck an iceberg on the starboard side at 11:40 p.m. on a night in April, 350 miles from Newfoundland. Possibly the most eerie similarity was that Robertson's fictional book was called The Titan. David Booth dreamed about a commercial aviation. The American Airlines Flight 191 crash on May 25, 1979, was one of the worst in American aviation history. After taking off from O'Hare Airport in Chicago, one of its engines separated from the wing and it into a nearby trailer park, 273 people. David Booth was an office manager in Cincinnati, and for 10 nights straight, he had the same nightmare of a commercial airliner. This spooked him enough to warn the FAA, and, to his surprise, they actually took him seriously. Then, of all the airline companies to warn, he specifically warned American Airlines. Creepily enough, his last nightmare came on May 24th, the night before the He watched the news that day and couldn't believe what he saw. He was even investigated but cleared of being a suspect, but authorities and everyone else were completely baffled by his nightmares. Barrett Naylor sensed both on the World Trade Center. We all know about the events on September 11th, 2001, but did you know that there was another to both towers in 1993? Wall Street executive Barrett Naylor somehow knew about both before they happened. Described as a brass tacks kind of guy, he had zero interest in anything psychic. But on the morning of February 26, 1993, Naylor was on his way to work at the World Trade Center when a feeling that he couldn't explain told him to turn around and go home. He did, and at 12:17 p.m., in the center, 6 people and over 1,000 more. 8 years later, on the morning of September 11th, he was again getting ready for work in the World Trade Center when he got the exact same feeling. Again, he followed his instincts, stayed home, and watched the unfold on the news. Weezer bassist Mikey Welsh predicted his own death on Twitter. On September 26, 2011, Weezer's former bassist Mikey Welsh tweeted, "Dreamt I'd in Chicago next week, hard in my sleep. Need to write my will today. Then later that same day, he corrected the date to the weekend after next. He in Chicago on October 8th because of his issues with. Most people took this as a planned, but his posts then became much more upbeat and positive. A week before his death, he tweeted off to Nashville to be photographed working on a big painting by a very good friend of mine, then off to Chicago to see the mighty Weezer rock out. I'm excited to see the boys hang out and have some fun. Even more mysterious is that he did from a heart, and although authorities suspected the toxicology report came back inconclusive. Edgar Allan Poe wrote about a very specific survival story. Poet and author Edgar Allan Poe was widely known for his dark, disturbing fictional tales. One book in particular made him known as a prophet of sorts. In 1838, the novel The Narrative of Arthur Gordon Pym of Nantucket describes a group of 4 shipwrecked sailors who are of starvation. They found and ate a tortoise, but it wasn't enough to sustain them. In a attempt at survival, they decide to draw straws and the person who draws the short straw. The cabin boy Richard Parker drew the short straw, and so they ate him and survived long enough to be rescued. In 1884, 46 years later, 35 years after Poe's death, the ship Mignonette sank and left 4 sailors shipwrecked. They too found a tortoise and ate it, but it wasn't enough. The cabin boy was so thirsty he drank seawater and became very ill. The other 3 sailors decided to him to survive and were later rescued. Spookily enough, the cabin boy's name was Richard Parker. Carl Jung's premonition about World War I. Carl Jung was one of the world's leading minds in psychotherapy. He never claimed to be a prophet, but in 1913, he had visions. He wrote, "I was suddenly seized by an overpowering vision. I saw a monstrous flood covering all of the northern and low-lying lands between the North Sea and the Alps. I saw mighty yellow waves, the floating rubble of civilization, and the bodies of uncounted thousands. Then the whole sea turned to." This vision came back to him in April, May, and one last time in June of 1914. The First World War began in July of 1914. Many people believed Jung's visions since the country of Germany stretches from the Alps to the North Sea, and mighty yellow waves that of uncounted thousands may have been mustard gas. It was used for the first time ever by Germans in World War I and killed anywhere from 90 to 120,000 people. A schoolgirl predicted her school's destruction. In October of 1966, in the mining town of Aberfan, Wales, 10-year-old Errol May Jones began randomly telling her mother that she was not afraid to because, as she said, "I will be with Peter and June," who were 2 of her friends from school. The mother initially shrugged off her daughter's comments, but the day before the Errol May specifically told her, "I dreamed I went to school and there was no school there. Something black had come down all over it." The town of Aberfan sat in a valley under a large pile of coal waste, and on October 21st, 1966, roughly 110,000 cubic meters of coal slurry consumed Errol's school, 144 people. It was the worst mining in British history. Errol was buried in a mass next to her classmates, Peter and June. Mark Twain predicted his own. Mark Twain was a renowned author best known for writing The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn. Only a few months before his birth on November 30th, 1835, Halley's Comet was the absolute closest to Earth. Twain seemed to think he and the comet were kindred spirits. It appears in our night sky every 74 years, and he accurately predicted that his would coincide with its next arrival in 1910. He said, "I came in with Halley's Comet in 1835. It's coming again next year and I expect to go out with it. It will be the greatest disappointment of my life if I don't go out with Halley's Comet." As predicted, the first sighting of Halley's Comet came on April 20th, 1910, and Mark Twain just one day later on April 21st. Sugar Ray Robertson's nightmare come true. In 1947, Sugar Ray Robertson was the welterweight champion of the world. The night before he was scheduled to defend his title against Jimmy Doyle, he dreamed that he killed Doyle in the ring with a single left hook. He was so shaken that he told promoters about the dream and begged them to cancel the fight. They brought in a priest and a minister who assured Robertson that his fears were unfounded. In the fight, Robertson knocked out Doyle with a left hook in the 8th round. Doyle was carried from the ring on a stretcher and the next day. Robertson was devastated by the event. After learning that Doyle intended to use the money from the fight to buy his mother a house, Robertson fulfilled Doyle's wishes and used the money for his next 4 bouts to buy Doyle's mother a house. But that's all for this time. If you guys enjoyed this video, please remember to give it a like, leave a comment, and of course share it. All of those things help me out tremendously in the algorithm, more than you probably know. And also, be sure to follow me on Twitch. Link is in the description. I go live every day. I will see you guys in the next video.